describe your organization. In this case, it's a university, and to put some context of how your organization functions with migrants and what work it does with migration.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm Peter Scholten, a professor in the governance of migration and diversity at Erasmus University Rotterdam. And we have been very happy to be a partner in this project, leading work package 4, focusing on volunteering in the creative arts sector. And I've been doing that together with my colleague, assistant professor Ilona van Breugel. Unfortunately, she cannot be with us today, which is very unfortunate. Yeah, our research group focuses a lot on migration and migration-related diversities, and then often from a governance perspective. So, for instance, we do a lot of research in our group on governance of anti-discrimination. We focus on governance of migration flows. We collaborate a lot with the city of Rotterdam, with national administrations, EU funds as well, but all focused on issues on the intersection between migration and governance questions. That's also why we were so delighted when we could take part in this project. I think that when looking at migration-related diversities and migration, there is this very persistent overestimation of what can be done with government policies, what a state-centric approach can do. As if migration and migration-related diversity is really something that's always up to states and to governments. Whereas if you look at society, then a lot of work actually takes place beyond governments. It's NGOs, it's migrants themselves interacting in, for instance, the sphere of volunteering, like in creative arts, what we have been studying. And that is really the sphere where a lot happens, but it's not always equally acknowledged by governments, but also not equally acknowledged in research. So I think the Volpower project really fills a gap in that regard by systematically studying the role of volunteering in how societies cope with migration-related diversities, or as policymakers call it, in migrant incorporation, migrant integration.
That's fantastic. And I'm also under the understanding you're part of IMISCE, or IMISCE, I think I'm pronouncing it wrong, which is the largest European network of scholars in migration integration. How does this tie into Volpower?
Yeah, indeed, I'm very happy to have been leading IMISCE now for almost eight years. We are an academic research network with almost 60 institutes from all over well, Europe and now also beyond. It's a globalizing network, and it really focuses on promoting good research on migration, integration, social cohesion, but also on capacity building, training for PhD students, early career scholars, across career levels actually, providing facilities for scholars from all over the world to meet. Our annual conference is one of the biggest dedicated migration conferences out there. And well, I owe my career to IMISCE, the very first conference that I ever attended. As a young first-year PhD student was an IMISCE conference. So I started building networks and contacts and started thinking about research and learning from others and working together with others in that setting. And that's where everything started. And I'm just very happy that I have been able to give something back to the network. There's in that sense, Volpower is also a project which is very important within the scope of the IMISCE Research Network. It's not an IMISCE research project in that sense, But for instance, we are considering publishing one of the book outputs of Volpower in the IMISCO publication series. So we play a part in the broader IMISCO research community as Volpower scholars as well. Yeah.
Moving on into the actual locality that you live in, locality Rotterdam is quite a big city, and it is quite a multinational city as well. And looking at the local context of that, how does the migration in Rotterdam and affect your research or the work that you do, and as well taking into consideration the Volpower consortium having a partner in Rotterdam? How did that impact Volpower?
Yeah. Well, we are always very happy to be situated in such not only dynamic city, but city where migration and migration-related diversities are absolutely crucial topics. Rotterdam is a city where, if you count the first and the second generation of migrants, their immediate descendants of migrants, then 52% of the population has a first or second generation migration background. So it's a city where it doesn't really make sense to talk about majority and minority, that those concepts are losing meaning. You can also not say, well, these are the minority groups in Rotterdam, because people come from so many different backgrounds that the concept of being a group or a community, it kind of loses meaning in a city like this. It is a city what some academics would describe as a super diverse city. And that for me as a migration scholar, I mean, we study any city, we just happen to be in Rotterdam, but for us it's a very interesting case study city. And there are more of these cities in Europe, and some of them also, of course, in our project, which go through this transformation process in a very rapid pace towards either already being or becoming a super diverse city. So it really filters in everything that we do. It filters in our research team, research opportunities also. We work a lot together with the city, trying to come up with innovative approaches. So that is one angle where Volpower comes in. So we work together with local actors. We talk to the city, and our knowledge feeds into urban policies. For instance, in understanding better what the role of volunteering can be or is in broader migrant incorporation processes. We really believe in, it's a Rotterdam Erasmus University model. We believe in science with a high level of societal impact. We don't believe in a sort of old-fashioned differentiation between pure fundamental science that should be demarcated from society. No, we really think that if you want to study dynamic topics like migration and diversity, you should do that in society, with society, not necessarily for society, but at least with society, and then make an important contribution to society. So that's really the model that we aspire to here in Rotterdam. So it filters into our research and how we do research with the city, but it filters more broadly. If you look at the research team that we have been composing, if you look at our student population, migrants are not the group or the other out there. They are part of our university, part of what we do. And I think that's absolutely essential. And we cannot just study inclusivity. We have to be inclusive ourselves as well. And when you become more inclusive, you also become more sensitive for new topics, interesting topics, areas that we never really understood or that never came on our agenda so far. So it's not just an academic interest in that sense. It's really part of who we are at Erasmus University Rotterdam. Doesn't mean that we are there. There's always things that can be better and will always be in flux. Because this is a society in flux. It's a floating city in, well, floating in the Netherlands can also mean literally floating. That's not what I mean, but it's a floating city, but a city with floating population. So that's the last thing I wanted to add. It's something that is not so pertinent in research yet, and certainly not in policies, but it is something that also in Volpower emerged on the radar, and something that is very visible in our city. It's not only the diversity of people who left one place, embarked on a migration journey, and then arrived and settled in Rotterdam and became new Rotterdammers. That still happens a lot, of course. It's still there, but it's a too simplistic portrayal. What we mean by Rotterdam as a floating population is what we see is an increasing percentage of the population that annually either moves in or out internationally. Part of the domestic mobility, the international mobility, is very high. So it's not just that people come to Rotterdam, there are also people leaving Rotterdam constantly. We see that in more cities like London. It's also a city where you clearly see this pattern, where the percentage of the population that is mobile is increasing so much. So that adds a new dimension to migration and diversity. But important for this project is that it increases the demand for resiliency in society. It increases the demand and also the desire of people whether you're a migrant or not, it doesn't even matter, but desire of people in society to connect in this floating population. And I think that's also something that we saw in Volpower, with the volunteers who come, TCN, third country nationals, they come here. Some of them aspire to settle, some want to move on, many don't know yet. So there is this feeling of being floating in between societies, and quite big narratives are sometimes imposed on these migrants about what it means to be Dutch, or that you're constantly reified with your background, that once an Eritrean, always an Eritrean, and then you're being treated as an Eritrean. Whereas most people just have a very basic human urge to connect and to be seen, and to relate to others and to talk with each other about how you identify. And your identity is usually also a floating thing. It changes over time. And that is very interesting in Volpower. If you really look at what actually happens with migrants in actual very local situations and organizations, like the creative arts sector, then you can grasp this more complex reality of migrants interconnecting with others and others interconnecting with migrants. You can really see and feel that. And I thought that was really an added value of this Volpower project. This will no doubt become even more important in the future when our societies become even more floating, even more mobile, then the demand for opportunities for people to interconnect will only increase. Yeah.
Okay. So you've actually, for example, you already mentioned, I was going to ask you about the paper you co-authored, which was coming to terms with super diversity in the case of Rotterdam. So you've pretty much already covered that. And what I will ask you now is, do you feel that, from what you said, social inclusion is not needed in Rotterdam, and that at the local, municipal and government level in the Netherlands, do you feel, and in Rotterdam City, do you feel that there are efforts to put arts, sports and volunteering at the forefront for integration, or it's just a societal glue more than anything?
Yeah, well, perhaps two comments. One is inclusion is more than ever required. And especially in this type of cities, where diversity is part of the urban identity. And that has always been the case, and now it's even more pertinent with 52% of the population having a first or second generation migration background. So then inclusion is vital for the city, for anything, for everything that we do, for the economy, for government, but primarily for people. And then it doesn't even really matter whether you're a migrant or not. I think everybody wants to live in an inclusive environment and be included, feel included, feel that it's okay, that you are who you are, and that you respect that you are a Rotterdammer. Doesn't matter where you come from, your future matters, that you are a Rotterdammer. So inclusion is very, very important here in this city. The city has done it's a laboratory. There have been a lot of experiments. It's a post-industrial city. So it looks in its approach sometimes like some of these other post-industrial cities like Naples, like Liverpool, Hamburg, Bremen, Bremerhaven, that type of cities. We really look like those cities. And in post-industrial cities, there is usually a more interventionist attitude. So I think Rotterdam government also has this history where we went back and forth between quite interventionist approaches, being tough on integration, and then being very cosmopolitanist city with very open, multicultural, and then going back again. So it has been going back and forth in this city quite a lot. So inclusion has always been on the radar, but the approach has varied a lot over time in the city. I think that's part of this struggle to come to terms with diversity. We see in almost all places. It's an important, it's an urgent, a high priority task. Doesn't mean that it's an easy task, and doesn't mean that being inclusive. It's one thing to observe that you want to be inclusive and that you need to be inclusive, but it's an entirely different thing to actually be inclusive. I think there in research also there is more that we can do. The how-to question and systematic knowledge, to put it more academically, systematic knowledge accumulation on strategies and instruments that can be used to actually promote inclusion. I think there we are not far enough yet, and I would really want to see more progress there. That's also the second point. If you then look at Volpower, this is now our tiny, modest, but important contribution here to show that you can contribute a lot to inclusion without always falling back on asking things from the government. Asking the government to come in and really relying and believing that this is something that can be solved with a state-centric approach. Societies are very resilient. People are very resilient. Migrants are very resilient. The people who are in contact with migrants are very resilient. So society can do far more than you think, but you should empower then society. So this connects Volpower to a broader development in the literature, which says that being inclusive is something that should be embedded in everything that we do. Some call it mainstreaming, but it's a little bit a contested concept, but embedding of inclusion in everything that we do. So inclusive education, inclusive labor market, inclusive housing, and we looked at inclusive creative arts sector. And I think that's very good. We shouldn't treat inclusion as a standalone topic and then say, oh, inclusion means we need to create activities targeted only at migrants, because that would deny how fundamental and foundational this topic is for everything we do in the city. So you want the inclusive approach in the creative arts sector to be relevant to all organizations active in the creative arts sector, and to all organizations active in housing, labor market, and whatever. And that's also what we saw. You see that the mainstream organizations, so organizations that don't say in their mission, we are here for migrants, they are very aware and they have a lot of knowledge, and far more than that they get credit for often, I have the feeling. And so they know a lot because they are close to the streets, the houses, the people. So they have learned and accumulated knowledge on how to be inclusive quite well. And I think that societies and also governments can learn a lot from that sometimes implicit knowledge that they have accumulated, and that if a society or a government wants to promote it further, it's not necessary to always then establish a new policy with a new coordinator and a new separate budget. No, try to see what forces you already have in society and promote those.
Okay, well, that was quite a an in-depth answer there. And with regards to Rotterdam University, what does the organization do? And in the context of Volpower, what did the organization do where it came to activities to get into the challenges of social inclusion and integration that Rotterdam is facing?
Yeah, yeah. So you mean our involvement in the project or our
The
role in
involvement in the
general, let's say?
project, the involvement in the project, and in general, how that then disperses into other things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in general, I have to say that we are very awake, to use that term, as university. I mean, all universities are traditionally quite elitist institutions, so we have to try very hard. And also, when it comes to equality of opportunities, we don't just fulfill our role; we fulfill a key role. So I think we all need to be very aware of that. I think our university has made a lot of progress in that regard. We are a university in a post-industrial city. So our student population has a very high percentage of people with a migration background, for instance. And that is very good, very well acknowledged nowadays. That this is not a drawback or a problem; it's an opportunity that we have to train the leaders of the future and to help shape our city in this way. And our university has made great steps. And we also have a very powerful diversity and inclusion office in the university, very centrally located, with high influence on everything that we do. So it's not just having meetings about diversity and inclusion, but it's also on how to make sure that our didactics are inclusive in the way that we exam, or the type of questions that we ask, or the readings that we give students, or how we approach students, but also amongst our staff. That's something which is maybe the easiest thing to agree. Staff needs to be diverse, but it's not always the easiest thing to solve fast. But there, at least, you see the urgency in this university. So this all has to do also with our impact ambition. Societal university with societal impact. It's the core ambition of our university. It's our university slogan also. To create positive societal impact, and yeah, the topic of inclusion, migration, and migrant incorporation. Those are, of course, core topics for a city like ours. And we are quite blessed also with a city that is eager for knowledge. So it's a city that wants to innovate and actively seeks knowledge to do that. So are we there? No, certainly not. What are we doing? Are we making progress? Yes, we are. And it's also visible. When I'm teaching and I look into my lecture room, I see also about half of my population that has another ethnic or racial background. And I'm incredibly proud of that as professor. It makes me very happy. And it gives me also optimism that the leaders, the future leaders that are in our lecture room, they are going to lead Dutch society, European society into the future. And for them, diversity is not always an easy thing. They also fight and have conflict and struggle with things. It's not that will never be out of the world, but for them, diversity is there. It's a new normality, yeah, that's progress that is being made very fast. So in Volpower, we did that also. So my colleague Ilona van Breugel has been incredibly active in reaching out to creative arts organizations, but also the municipality, the city of Rotterdam, to work together, to co-produce the knowledge that comes out of this project. We have, for instance, one of the NGOs, Hip Hop House. It's a very nice general creative arts institution focused on the hip hop dance, but also related cultural expression forms. And Ilona has had a very close relationship with them, and they've collaborated in the project. They're also mentioned in all the output of the project, because they are one of those organizations where you see that volunteering plays an important role. where migrants play an important role in the organization, although they are not approached as migrants always. I want to really make that point very clear, that that's a signal that it's going very well, that migrants feel included, but don't always feel approached as only migrants. That is very important. Our research also shows that to them that's very important. Yeah. So we try to co-produce our knowledge, and our methodology in the project also follows this co-design logic, where there's analysis. We systematically study the role that creative arts can play. Then we co-produce innovative approaches together with people actually out there, stakeholders. So the stakeholders are not just actors out there, they are participants in the research. And we also test it together with them and only then produce the research output. So it's not like we do our project and then write a nice report and send it into the city. They have been part of our journey together, and that worked very well. Yeah.
Okay. In fact, you now tackled the question which I was going to ask you to talk about the organization.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah.
No, it's perfect. The conversation is going in the perfect direction, and you've tackled the question, which is the volunteering organizations, because at the end of the day, Volpower, that's what we wanted. We wanted to reach out to organizations and to volunteers. The volunteers that you had working with you, could you tell us a bit more about them? Could you tell us about what were their objectives, what they were trying to do, and how that tied in with Volpower?
Yeah, no, of course. It has been particularly Ilona van Breugel, who has been in very close contact with them, and well, they've built up a relationship also between university and these creative arts organizations, which is very good, because for us as university, if we say we want societal impact, then you also need to live up to that promise and then work together with everyone in the city. So what you see is that there is a quite diverse group of people involved in these organizations and happy to collaborate with us, coming from different backgrounds. Some are really TCN migrants, third country nationals, refugees, for instance, still trying to find their way into the society. Some are more experienced, are here for a longer time, and some are also other Rotterdammers who sometimes are there to help volunteers with different backgrounds, but also many of them are just people active in these organizations with no particular focus of migrants, but their activities are very helpful to the migrants who come to the organizations. So our objective also was to make them aware of the importance of inclusion to their activities. I think what's very nice to see, I think I said that briefly before also, that in some organizations, in some cases, we also saw that this label migrants for the volunteers became gradually irrelevant. And so when TCNs come in, and being a migrant, being new, it really dominates your feeling and how you see the others and how others see you. And when you get involved into these volunteering activities, then that can fade to the background. That's a positive thing. Then they feel included because they are part of the hip hop house, and they're engaging in creative arts activities together, and they are sometimes sharing experiences about migration backgrounds, but they're not just there's this transformation taking place from being just a migrant, from being somebody with a migration background, but being in Rotterdam and connecting with others. And I think that is something that shows the success of volunteering activities, but also of activities focused on interaction more and more in general. Second thing I wanted to add here is that working together with these NGOs, then there's something specific emerged for the creative arts sector. That's a very expressive activity, of course. It's different like in labor markets where you just need competencies, skills, and then enter the labor market. It's quite straightforward. you could say quite colorblind in a sense, but that's for the creative arts sector not necessarily the case. It's very expressive. So you talk, it provides unique opportunities for relating to each other, sharing stories about the past, about how it feels to come from elsewhere, how it feels to be a migrant, how it feels to be somebody with a specific ethnic or racial background in the city of Rotterdam, and to talk with each other and to express that. Words can sometimes, well, just not cover what intercultural interaction really involves. And words can lead to misunderstandings, difference in language understanding. Words can also lead to conflict. But in expression in creative arts sector, this can also provide a sort of a platform to engage and really interconnect with each other. Sometimes at basic sentiments, like being homesick, or by the unknown, of the other being an unknown, or about insecurity, or about still feelings of anxiety of what happened in the past, things like that. And those are for anybody studying and trying to understand migration and diversity, very basic, very fundamental things. And the creative arts sector can be pertinent in that regard. Yeah.
Do you feel the volunteers that came for Volpower benefited directly from Volpower?
I hope so. I think so. I hope so. But I hope they learn from us also, and that we help to open the eyes to their potential, the huge potential role in interconnecting people, and also the importance of being inclusive, not just saying it, but also being it. And that is for creative arts sector, just as any other sector, important, of course. We also saw that not all activities in creative arts are equally inclusive. The creative arts sector also has a background, a history. So in some cases, the transformation goes easier than in others. But I really want to emphasize that I think what was most important is that we learn from them. From our academic perspective, when you really want to do something with voluntary integration, that we should look at, we should really go far closer to the people who are actually interrelating. I have the feeling that the discussion about migrant incorporation is often stuck at a rather abstract level. We talk about broad national identities, national politics, national solidarity, and those are rather abstract concepts. And if you then engage with the volunteers like what we learn from our volunteers is that incorporation or interaction, or however we conceptualize it, it's very concrete, humane, a basic human thing to understand, where big debates about national identity and policies sometimes do have an impact, but it doesn't cover the entire story. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot of implicit knowledge, and in some parts they are far ahead of the national debate. Not always because, in most cases because they want to, but not always even. In many cases also because they are not even that they are aware, but just because they need to, because it's their reality. If you are the hip hop house and you work with hip hop dance, hip hop culture in Rotterdam, then diversity is there. It is part of everything that you do, of the people, of your communication, of your audience, of your expressive art itself. It's part of everything. And that's really something that we learned from them, from those volunteers, how resilient they are and how much diversity for them is already a normality. And not just because of the normative debates, but because it's their reality. It's there, and they have, you asked me a question earlier about coming to terms with super diversity, where you see that at a political level, policy level, but also big national debates. it's quite a struggle to come to terms with super diversity. But if you really zoom in on society, like we have done in Volpower, I've become a far more optimistic person. You see that in these in proximity toward super diversity, you see that a lot of lessons have already been learned, a lot of knowledge has already been accumulated. And we have been very grateful and honored to be able to tap into their knowledge. I think for us at an academic level, it's incredible that we have been able to do that. Yeah.
Okay, so you've learned quite a bit from your volunteers as well.
Certainly, yeah.
And have you seen any things which you weren't expecting, especially from the international community, since, of course, the consortium was quite a number of countries? Have you noticed with the other partners there were things very different to what you expected them to be?
Wow, that's a very hard question. I think it was very interesting to look beyond the boundaries of the Netherlands to see what happens in other cases. And I think my answer to your question should be no. Yeah, so I didn't see any surprising differences, to phrase it very precisely. And what I did see is a lot of very interesting developments in creative arts, but also sports, the other work package, a lot of interesting activities and a lot of parallels across countries. So in spite of all the big debates about Dutch national identity, Maltese national identity, Slovenian identity, this big politics, big words, big ideas, if you really zoom in on society, we are much more alike. And you see that when you zoom in on volunteering. Volunteering are all new people. In our study cases, they're new people coming into a new country, trying to kind of relate to others and doing that through sports or to creative arts activities. And we've seen also in the host society, don't like the word, but let's say the people in the organizations, a very big, very high level of willingness to interact and to see it as an opportunity for sports or creative arts to engage with new people. So yes, I saw an incredible amount of very interesting things. But no, I didn't see striking differences between the countries, and I think that is one of the most striking findings. If you look beyond the big politics, if you really bother to look beyond the big politics and the big words, you see quite generic, universal patterns of interculturalization, you could say. Yeah.
Okay. Now, jumping back onto the main topic for you, which is, as a professor, you do a lot of research, and quite a big part of Volpower was indeed based on gathering and analyzing data. From the outcomes of the project, from the perspective of work and input from your organization, what was the most that you focused on and worked on?
Oh yeah, it's a pity that Ilona is not here. I think that Ilona would agree with me. I hope that she would agree with me. That I think this engaging with stakeholders in efforts to co-design, co-develop innovative approaches, that's something that we in our team, and Ilona in particular, have been very busy with and excited about. So it's still, if you take it to a broader level, we are still coming from a paradigm of old science, where we do research, theory-driven, and society is the other, that but we are not part of that. The new science says, no, that's not the case. Social scientists, at least, we are scientists, we are people doing fundamental science in society and with society. So that's at a high level. If you then zoom in, that's what we did with these co-design methods. So the NGOs, the volunteers, people from the city, they have been partners in our project. And I hope that if you would ask them, that they would also say, well, this was a partnership. this was not an Erasmus University research project on us, a sort of an inquiry. No, it was a partnership, and we co-designed and co-developed something of which we learned something. And I think that was something that we were really most busy with and learned a lot, also at a methodological level. So how do you make this work, and how do you make people excited to do this and to maintain this partnership? It's quite intensive to build this partnership and to maintain it, and to also make sure it's a fruitful partnership. It requires a lot of extra work, which in traditional research projects you would not prepare for. But I think this was absolutely essential to design the project in a way. And I take this as something with me to the next project. This partnership, this is modern science. And if we want to do good science, relevant science, and have societal impact, then this is the way. And co-design is a key methodology to do that. Doing science with high societal impact doesn't mean that it's less foundational science, less fundamental research. That's not the case at all. We follow a very concise co-design methodology. It's a very difficult, complex, well advanced and methodology on which we are held accountable. And in my view, that is a 21st century form of fundamental research. And it's also good for society. So it's a win-win situation.
What I'm going to ask you is if you could build on the partnership that you built with the other organizations, with the individuals. Could you tell us a bit more about how this partnership worked, some stories that came out of this? Because at the end of the day, I know you would agree with me how you've been speaking. It's the human element that everyone looks out for. Yeah.
No, I think the nice thing about this partnership is that it really was a new partnership. So there were no contacts before. So I remember that when Ilona started reaching out to the city, it was also hard at first. People coming from Erasmus University, EU-funded project that creates sort of an impression as if, well, like I said before, as if it's an inquiry whether you're doing things right. So it took some time to build trust and to build those relationships. But once you have them at a personal level, it's really good. And you saw that our volunteers also went to the trainings in Volpower, felt included in that setting. They contributed to the online exhibition of Volpower, and well, we also try to maintain this contact and this partnership now, so that there's so that it doesn't feel like an end of a project, but it's just one stage in a long-term partnership. I'm quite certain that we will come back to them. And there is, I mean, there are even developments already in the city where there is a migration museum being founded in this city. And in our conversations with that city, with that museum, we also delve a lot on the information and the knowledge that we have accumulated in Volpower with our volunteers in, for instance, creative arts expressions on what it is to be a migrant at basic emotional level, of being homesick, needing to cope with things from your past, engaging with the others. And so in that sense, that partnership in Rotterdam, it's only extending further. And if we would really at some point be able to make a meaningful contribution to our Rotterdam Migration Museum to be founded in a couple of years, yeah, that would be an incredible positive impact, positive outcome also of the knowledge that we produced in Volpower. Yeah.
Since time is running out, I'll ask you the two main questions that remain. The first one is, could you tell us a little bit about your involvement in the academic workshop, which is coming at the end of this month of April 2021? And also, while doing that, talk little bit about the final report for Work Package 2.
Yeah. The final report on Work Package 2, I think we we are already there with Arma. So I wouldn't know what to add on that
Okay, then
regards, unless there is something pending that I'm not aware of. But I think we completed the Dutch this case study on Rotterdam. So a lot of things that I addressed on being a super diverse city, a city which is very keen on integration, and where governments have been waking up about the huge potential for inclusion of empowering volunteers. That's really a model that we brought from the Rotterdam case study into the Work Package 2 reporting. I think that's very central. And I think another key message that we took from the Dutch case is that it's so important to make sure that you engage with migrant communities, but that's not enough. You need to make sure that everybody is aware that when you work in a super diverse city like this, being inclusive applies to everyone. So also organizations that don't have in their mission that they work with migrants, those also need to be involved. And we were very positively surprised by the knowledge that they have already accumulated. But I already said that before. Academic workshop, yeah, I will be there, of course, in the academic workshop. And I'm very happy that in the academic workshop we also try to make use, or how do you say, try to go a little bit further with the huge academic potential from this project. Like I said in the beginning, the role of volunteering in migrant incorporation is something that academics agree that that's a very important role, but there are not many academics who are really studying it. It may also be a consequence because there are not a lot of governments who are funding research in that direction. It's a blind spot for some governments, volunteering. But that only increases the need for us to reach out and to share our findings with the broader academic public at the academic workshop. And well, I'm happy to be in the editorial team of a book that comes out of the workshop. So we'll be looking for very high quality contributions in that workshop and working with the authors to make sure that we have a very nice book product that then hopefully can be submitted somewhere this year and then published early next year on this role of volunteering in migrant incorporation. Yeah.
Perfect.
And hopefully that will be published in our EMISCO book series. That would be very nice.
That would be great. I think it's best to close an interview such as this with something personal. What do you feel was your most important takeaway from Volpower? A valuable experience, knowledge gained, or insights which you feel just came specifically from this project?
Yeah, the incredible expertise that is already there and that we never studied. So that in these organizations, diversity is a normality. And for them, it's a part of their everyday everything. And I think that was for me a glance into the future. I hope that we reach this point for all organizations, that they are inclusive in that way, that they are aware in that way, and that for them diversity is not just not just about big words and about normativity. No, it's there, and you work with it every day. You start your day, you end your day with being inclusive in a diverse setting, because that is the way that you can best achieve the goals of your organization. I think that's my main takeaway. I really learned from that. I think this is a call upon academics to study that more systematically. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Peter. This was an amazing interview.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Yeah.